Hi everybody, I'm Tim from troutandfeather.com, and in this fly tying tutorial we're going to tie a really neat pattern called the MS Bugger. Stay tuned. Before we start tying this pattern, let me give you a quick sneak peek at the MS Bugger. There are really only two major materials in this fly, the marabou and the body material, and I'll be showing you that in just a moment. I partnered this with a cone head, and there's a little bit of extra weight within the hook, but all in all, this is an extremely simple fly that is just down and dirty, really buggy, and it catches fish. Let's start tying this one. Let's start tying this MS Bugger. In my Stonfo Transformer vise, I have a hook from Allen Fly Fishing. It's their S402BL. That's kind of like a long-shanked nymph hook, though I really prefer it for streamers. The size that I'm tying today is a size 8, though I'll tie this pattern anywhere between a size 6 the whole way down to a size 12, sometimes 14s, but 12 tends to be that small size that I prefer. You'll notice I have a cone head on this right now. That's a brass cone head. The color is black nickel. It's a 4mm cone head, and I have it paired with a little bit of wire. It's 0.015 wire. Whenever I tie this in smaller sizes, sometimes I will just do without that cone head, but I always keep that wire just because I like to have a little bit of weight near the front of this pattern. The thread I'm using today is some 6/0 uni thread. The color is an olive dun. And what we're going to do is just you'll first kind of point out that with that lead wire, I have around 14 wraps of that wire on there. I'm just going to push it up towards that cone. Then I'm going to take my thread and kind of lock it in place right past that wire. Then we're just going to do our best to cover this. That wire really isn't going to be going anywhere, and it's not going to be showing through, but I just want to make sure that everything is kind of locked in nicely. And in the event I lose any of my body material, I don't want that wire to really be so prominent showing through. Now we're going to get back to our tailing section. I'm going to grab a piece of some olive marabou. What I like about the marabou that I'm using today is that this is considered a grizzly marabou. So even though it's olive, it's also going to have kind of a darker variegation in it. Not quite black, more of just a dark olive. Just going to kind of pinch it together. Figure out my length, and I want it to be about the length of the body, somewhere around there. Just going to lock it in place with 3 or 4 wraps. And once I have it locked, I want to trim the butt end, but I want to trim it as close to where that wire ends as possible, just to help create more of a uniform body. And once we have all that marabou locked in place, now it's time to add kind of the main feature for this fly, our body. I'm going to be using this really cool material. It's called MS Bugger Dub. It's from Fly Tyer's Dungeon. You're going to notice it's a really just wild color. There's other colors of this one, but this is that one that I just continually just turn to. It's a really great fish producer, and it's got some interesting material in it. You can see there's a little bit of shiny dubbing in it. Then it's kind of partnered with these rubber legs. In this case, chartreuse, and it looks like a dark brown. Now, if you try to dub this material straight on, sometimes those rubber legs just won't come out right, and they just look a little off. So I decided to use a dubbing loop with this. Now, the dubbing loop tool I really prefer to use is made from Stonfo. This is called their Stonfo Elite dubbing tool. Just a really great one because of the ball bearing. And to use this, it's pretty simple. Just going to kind of grab onto the thread and double my thread over, making the loop. Once I have that loop locked in place, I'll just set this tool down for a second. Wind forward and lock my thread in place with a half hitch. I'm going to use the rotary feature of this vise. I'm just going to let my thread dangle out of the way. I'm going to return to my dubbing loop, and I'm going to start putting some of this material within it. I've kind of already pre-broken up this material a little bit because it's just kind of a crazy material. So I really want it just kind of, I don't want to say uniform because I don't want it too perfect with all those colors kind of, we'll say, blending really well with the chartreuse and the brown, chartreuse and the brown. I do want it to be a little bit natural, but I want to make sure I have rubber legs in every section of this. Once I have them locked in place, going to let the tool face the camera and just spin. You'll see those rubber legs will go everywhere. And they start to kind of get locked around. So I'm just taking my fingernail and rubbing it up and down. Spin for just a little bit more. Now I'll just leave it here and start wrapping forward. Now if you feel like you have a need to really pull everything back and palmer it a little bit, you can. You'll lose a little bit of dubbing that way, which is not a bad thing because we can then just store that back in the package. And once I get close to that head, I'm just going to return to my thread, get that extra arm out of the way. Just lock the material in place with just a couple turns. That's all it's really going to need. Now I can return my thread to my right hand, get everything finalized, get my dubbing loop out of the way. I have a nice little gap there whenever I pull everything back. When I release it, it tends to kind of shoot back up towards the head. So I know I've finished it. I'm going to go immediately to my whip finish. And I want to make sure my knot is locked just behind that cone head. I don't want anything creeping forward, because then I can be sure I'm really not going to have too much of a chance of losing that thread. It's not going to be banging against anything. Now you can see I'm just going to go through and pick everything out a little bit, just go in that opposite direction. When I have legs that are super long, I can just take my scissors and trim them. And you'll probably see that some of these legs, because of that dubbing loop, they got bound together. So I just take my scissors, just going to go through and just open those up a hair. I prefer their ends being on the outside. In this case where it's really crazy, that's not a bad thing, because once this gets wet, it is going to look just absolutely wild. All right, and that I think will finalize this pattern. You can see this is just an absolutely easy one. I'll give you a quick 360 of this, make sure those lights are on it. And I'm hoping that you're looking at this right now thinking, geez, how crazy is this fly and how many different variations are there out there, because there are a ton. So let me change the camera angle a little bit and tell you just a little bit more about this MS Bugger. Talk about an easy fly to tie and just a great pattern to fish. What I love about these flies is that you can just crank them out on a regular basis, and you know that there are so many different variations out there. Before we talk about those, let me first just mention a little tidbit about the name. I call this the MS Bugger simply because on that package of dubbing, that's what it says. I bought this dubbing from Fly Tyers Dungeon, and this is a website that I've kind of heard about over the last couple years, and I finally took a few minutes, sat down and just looked at some of the products, and as soon as I saw this material, I thought to myself, this looks really neat and I got to try this stuff out. I asked a few guys that also tie about it, and they hadn't liked it because if you try to just simply dub it like a dubbing noodle directly onto the thread, sometimes a lot of those rubber legs will just kind of fall off. So once I kind of read a little bit more about it, I realized that dubbing loop would be just an easy approach. It would be the best approach, and it had a way to kind of lock everything in place and really ensure that everything just kind of bugs out whenever you wrap it forward, and it definitely did. The MS, I believe, will stand for the Mad Scientist, because whenever I look around their website, there's an email link to the Mad Scientist, so I'm guessing that's what it stands for, but I am definitely not an expert on that. So if you know anything more about it, just mention it below in the comments section. Well, I also kind of talked about variations, and there are so many different things you can do with this fly. You can put a hot spot at the front, you can add some crystal flash to the back, you can change that marabou to maybe a rabbit instead. Really, the sky is the limit. Have fun with this one, because whenever I think about all the possibilities that dubbing really opens up, those possibilities are just completely endless. Have fun with it and let me know some of those color combinations that you experiment with. Whenever it comes down to fishing flies like this, really kind of the sky is again the limit. You can kind of bounce them off the bottom, you can strip them, you can fish these in rivers, you can fish them in lakes. Buggers are just one of those flies that always catch fish wherever you go, and sometimes it really just comes down to the color of the pattern you're fishing. So really think about those colors that you have success with on the waterways you're already fishing, and try to get some of these tied in those colors too. I know they're going to work. Well, this is a fast one. I'm going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, you can check out my website, which is troutandfeather.com. I also have a Facebook page and an Instagram account under that Trout and Feather heading. If you have any questions or comments, you can always email me at tcamisa@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment down below in the comments section. And like I previously mentioned, I'd love to hear about some of the color combinations and any other ways that you've experimented with this dubbing. Well, once again, thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see all of you next time.